Hello, my name is Tom Sowden, and I'm going to be talking to you about the continuing influence of Ed Ruscha on book artists. During the 1960s and 70s, Ruscha produced 16 small self-published books that became a catalyst for how artists could approach the book form. He wasn't the only artist at the time to consider the potential of books, but his reputation has been cemented as a revolutionary in this new approach to artist books. This reputation has grown, and his influence on book artists remains strong to this day, to the extent that his books are appropriated across the world by a successive generation of artists. I'm going to take you on a brief journey that begins with Ruscha's books, then how he may possibly have appropriated the work of others. I'll then focus in on the community of book artists who make with reference to Ruscha's books. Ruscha produced his first book, 26 Gasoline Stations, in 1963. The book documents the journey from Los Angeles to Oklahoma City on Route 66. As stated by Clive Philpott, Ruscha established the paradigm for a new concept of the cheap multiple booklet as art. It is an artwork, not documentation, not theory, not a literary work. It is not a book of reproductions of artworks. The work is dependent upon the book structure. The book stood out because Ruscha had utilised cheap commercial production and distribution systems that allowed him to keep costs down and to distribute this to a different audience. Ruscha continued to use the book form as an output between 1963 and 1978. His second book, Various Small Fires and Milk, from 1964, is in a similar format to 26 Gasoline Stations and shows 15 small fires that are predominantly domestic in nature: candles, lighters, gas rings, cigarettes, and so on. The final image is of a glass of milk, perhaps the relief from all that burning. Ruscha's third book from 1965 was Some Los Angeles Apartments, a book depicting 38 photographs of various apartment blocks in the Los Angeles area that typify the architecture of that time. Ruscha is defined very much as a West Coast American artist, with a lot of the content for his books being derived from the Los Angeles environment. The architecture, the car, the palm trees, and the cactus depict his place and his environment. This is evident in further books, such as Every Building on the Sunset Strip from 1966, which depicts exactly as the title suggests, in a long concertina, one side of the street at the top of the page, the other at the bottom, and 34 Parking Lots in Los Angeles from 1967, for which Ruscha commissioned a professional aerial photographer, Art Alanis, to take photographs of a series of predominantly empty parking lots from above. Nine Swimming Pools and a Broken Glass from 1968 marks another small departure from Ruscha's previous works in that it is printed in colour. As the title suggests, it presents us with 9 photographs of swimming pools and many empty pages between, with a broken glass to conclude. There is no figure present in the images, but there is evidence of someone having been there. Ripples in the water and wet footprints on the side allude to a hidden narrative. Most of Ruscha's books are notable for the absence of people in the images. Although their presence is felt, they are rarely seen. However, within his 16 books, there are those that are collaborative efforts, and in these there often exists a much clearer narrative structure that places people at the centre. Royal Road Test from 1967 is a book produced in conjunction with Mason Williams and Patrick Blackwell, and presents the forensic documentation of the process and aftermath of throwing a royal typewriter from a moving Buick in the Nevada desert, a playful parody on the Beat generation of writers. In Crackers from 1969, Ruscha collaborates with Mason Williams again. Williams is a writer and musician and a schoolhood friend of Ruscha's. Crackers includes a short text on the flyleaf, written by Williams, that describes a man seducing a woman to eventually lie on a bed covered with salad leaves in a downmarket hotel, covering her in salad dressing before declaring he has forgotten the crackers, at which point he leaves to go and eat crackers on his own in an upmarket hotel. The book, as you can see, is filled with photographs on the recto that illustrate this text. When you start to delve deeper into Ruscha's books, it becomes apparent that he may have been appropriating the work of others, as in this case of the 1954 book called Crackers in Bed. This is not an artist book, it's a joke book, but the title and image bear such a resemblance to Ruscha and Williams' book. Another edition that bears a striking resemblance to one of Rusch's is Ginza Kawaii Ginza Hacho, produced by Shohachi Kimura and Yoshikazu Suzuki in Japan in 1954. The Ginza Hacho volume is a long concertina that depicts all the buildings on one street in Ginza, spliced together in a continuous line with one side of the street at the top and the other at the bottom. It is remarkably similar to Rusch's Sunset Strip, yet precedes it by 12 years. Ruscha has not confirmed that this is an influence on his work. And it appears that further traditions from Japan could have been a big influence on Ruscha. There are strong similarities from the 19th century, in particular Hokusai and Hiroshiga. Themed, numbered collections of prints and documentations of the landscape and environment, such as 36 views of Mount Fuji by Hokusai, and this example, the 53 stations of the Tokaido from 1833 by Hiroshiga, a document of his journey that he travelled along the Tokaido Road in 1832. The stations as rest areas along the Tokaido Road, rest areas much like gasoline stations from Rusch's Drive. But it could also be that Ruscha adopted standard civil recording techniques. A book entitled Magdalen Street, Norwich, An Experiment in Civic Design contains a pull-out concertina that depicts Magdalen Street. It was a book that was presented as a blueprint for how to regenerate further high streets across the world. It's been photographed by Philip Arms, who was employed by the council, in much the same way that Ruscha presented Sunset Strip years later, one side of the street at the top of the page and the other at the bottom. In turn, Rusch's books have had a huge impact on a long succession of artists interested in the book as artwork. I believe his books are often seen as a composition to be enacted, much as sheet music or a script. Being Rusch's first and most iconic book, 26 Gasoline Station has become one that has inspired many since. One of the first produced was Jeff Brau's 26 Abandoned Gasoline Stations from 1992. It's produced in a style that mimics Rusch's book, and Brau's employs a deadpan neutral gaze, similar to that of Ruscha. The abandoned stations have become a popular theme, and in photographing these beautiful structures, it seems natural that artists have referred to Ruscha in presenting this work in the book format. Eric Tabuki also produced a publication called 26 Abandoned Gasoline Stations in 2009. Here, images of the abandoned shells of recently and long-closed stations are not presented in a codex form, but on a series of postcards collected in a slipcase. These are no longer relevant buildings for route planning, so the individual postcards and the changing order of these, as they're interacted with, makes sense. There is no formal journey that needs to happen between them. The influence of gasoline stations and the 26 theme extends into other books. 28 Casillas de Seguridad by Victoria Biancachetti from 2009 details security posts located at every corner and being part of the urban geography of Victoria's hometown in Argentina. She began photographing them in 2005, struck by how these security posts followed neighbourhood characteristics in terms of the colours, the design of their tiny gardens, the materials with which they were built, even their architectural styles. Increasingly, the internet is a source of images and material for the appropriated books, as in the book 26 Gasoline Stations 2.0 by Michael Miranda from 2010. Here Miranda has recreated Rusch's book using the same images in the same sequence and format, but by taking these images wholly from the internet. As Miranda says at the back of this book, absolutely no effort has been made to secure permission for use of any images reproduced within this book. Joachim Schmidt is another artist who has used the internet as a means to generate images for a Ruscha appropriated book. This 2009 book, 26 gasoline stations, every building on the Sunset Strip, 34 parking lots, 9 swimming pools, a few palm trees, no small fires, manages to combine the title of 6 of Rusch's books, and again uses images taken from Google Earth. These show everything described in the comprehensive title. As Schmidt says, unlike the original books it relates to, this work was made entirely at my Berlin studio. I didn't visit Los Angeles to make the book, and I didn't use a camera either. The camera is out there. Various Small Fires is another Ruscha book that has been returned to often. Jan Sarandor's 36 Fire Stations from 2004 is an appropriation and a reference to two of Ruscha's books, 26 Gasoline Stations and Various Small Fires. The same size, format and title font as Ruscha's, it documents all the fire stations in operation in Montreal on one day, on the 9th of December 2001. There are only 33 stations depicted, as he was using information gathered in 1999, and 3 had relocated or closed down since. In Various Fires and 4 Running Boys by Thomas Scala from 2009, the small from Ruscha's book has now been lost. Inside, the images are from the media that depict riots, terrorist attacks, forest fires and natural disasters. These are no longer domestic fires, but those on a much larger and catastrophic scale. This is destruction, not warmth. In the final image of the 4 running boys, it appears that they are escaping, running away from the fire in a shower of debris. Referring to Ruscha's Every Building on the Sunset Strip, Jonathan Monk produced None of the Buildings on the Sunset Strip in 2002. This humorous take on Ruscha's now focuses on the streets that come off the strip. He has driven the same route, but taken pictures of the crossroads rather than of the buildings. As with many of Ruscha's other books, Sunset Strip has influenced a range of artists to produce many appropriated works. Returning to the speculation on whether Ginza Kawaii Ginza Hacho was an influence on Ruscha, Michaelis Pickler has played with this in his 2018 book Ginza Hacho, Every Building on the Ginza Strip. Appropriating both their works, outwardly this book has a striking resemblance to Ruscha's. Long concertina with silver slipcase. However, inside, the images are from contemporary photographs documenting every building on Tokyo's Ginza Street. Pickler acknowledges that although Ruscha's books have gained international recognition, Ginza Hacho remains largely unknown. Because of the nature of the aerial images in Ruscha's 34 parking lots, this is a book in particular that demands to be remade using internet-sourced images and has been visited by various artists. Thanks to Google, the internet is awash with aerial images of almost every inch of the planet, including many Los Angeles parking lots. Susan Porteous has made a book in a near identical fashion to Ruscha, with her 34 parking lots 40 years later from 2007, a version that is smaller and presents us with black and white images similar to Ruscha's. This is not to say that all imagery is derived remotely from the internet. Sometimes artists visit the same places as Ruscha. In the book More Los Angeles Apartments and 23 Min Photo from 1998, the Canadian artist John O'Brien has photographed apartment blocks on South Normandy in Los Angeles. This is a play on Ruscha's Some Los Angeles Apartments and also Sunset Strip with the in-depth study on one street. O'Brien's book features photographs of the 23 Min Photo Shop, which is a Ruscha-style name indeed, but also where he had his photographs developed. Eric Doringer is another artist who has gone back to the places first photographed by Ruscha. Doringer recreated Ruscha's real estate opportunities in 2009. Ruscha's book features photographs of vacant building plots around Los Angeles, a book of possibilities and anticipation. Doringer returned to the same locations and photographed them from the same vantage point, where he found few of the lots remained vacant. They had been replaced by strip malls, Christian centres, restaurants and so on. Doringer is a serial copier of Ruscha, and in look and feel, Doringer's books are almost identical to Ruscha's books. A personal favourite of mine from the myriad of Ruscha homages is 15 Pornography Companies by Louisa Van Leer from 2006. As with Ruscha, this is a recording of the architecture that could be said to be typical of that found in Los Angeles, but focusing on the more contemporary buildings used by the many pornographic production companies across the city. As Van Leer states, the photographs reveal the mundane, nearly invisible side of an otherwise sensationalised industry. There are other ways in which Ruscha's books have been used as source material. Various blank pages, produced by Doro Boehm and Eric Baskauskas in 2009. Both Boehm and Baskauskas worked at the Joan Flash Artist Book Collection at the School of the Arts Institute in Chicago, which, as they say, gives us the privilege of access to some of Ruscha's most famous and rare bookworks, as well as insight into the glut of knockoffs and homages that the scene produces. They decided to produce their own homage based on Rusch's love of empty space within his books. Various blank pages consist of reproductions of the blank pages from his iconic work. Lastly, and again playing with the possible Japanese influence on Ruscha, Lucy May Schofield has produced 2 books that reference Ruscha and Hokusai, 19 Fuji views from 2015 and 17 Fuji views from 2019. These depict snatched and clear glimpses of the imposing peak of Mount Fuji. Schofield has spent considerable time in Japan, and these photographs often show the mundane and ordinary Japanese landscape in the foreground in relation to this dominating mountain. I've only presented here a very small selection from the multitude of Ruscha-inspired books. Print-on-demand publishing has facilitated an explosion in these books, as it is now so easy and cheap to produce a mass-produced Ruscha-style book. Much like the adoption of existing book and production distribution techniques that Ruscha employed to circumnavigate the gallery system, with print-on-demand it has become even easier. Encompassed in a complete package of design, production and distribution, artists no longer have the outlay expense of producing several hundred books to keep costs low. Print-on-demand allows the artist to self-publish with no gatekeeper and no initial outlay at all. Consequently, these books keep coming and are often made without knowledge of the wider environment and community of others. This collective body of knowledge keeps growing and gathering strength, and the collection is key to understanding this work. The collection of books based on a collection of books that explores collections. It truly makes sense when they're all viewed together.